think I speak for everyone when I say TikTok if you guys can help me get to 10,000 followers. In this video, I'm rebranding Junk Food to appear healthy. I'm going to bend the facts, change the styles, and use a little marketing mischief to trick you into thinking sugar and fat is actually good for you. And first up, we have Mountain Dew. Now, this may shock you, but I've never actually drank one of these before. Supposedly, it's got a lemon-lime flavor similar to Sprite. Let me know if that's accurate or not. Either way, one thing is for sure, it is definitely targeted towards teenagers. I mean, just look at all these bright colors, sharp edges, and cool triangles. And this bad boy right here has a whopping 46 grams of sugar, which basically means one can of this stuff and you're halfway to diabetes. So I think the only hope we really have of making this appear healthy is to lean into the fact that it's called Mountain Dew. And mountains are in nature, and nature generally gives off a more healthy vibe. So we could just throw a big mountain on here, but that just feels a little too generic. So instead, I want to make an illustration of a mountain man. And this young fella right here seems to be perfect to model him after. And his face is a little long, so I'll just squish that down a bit. Now he needs a big old mountain beard. Basically, I want this drink to feel like it's for the outdoors. Somebody that likes nature and presumably likes to consume more natural foods and drinks. Of course, he'll need a body since we don't want him running around headless. And let me see if I can find a hat worthy of our adventurer. Perfect. And now I'm going to whip out the trusty drawing pad to make an epic illustration. Let's start with the eyes, since those are the gateway to the soul. The Lord only knows what kind of soul this man has. Get the eye bags in there. And of course, a nice chunky nose with some big bushy eyebrows for a stern yet calm look. He is older, so a good amount of wrinkles are in order. Now, how in the world do you draw hair? Well, you first want to separate the hair into larger chunks that have a defined shape, and make sure there's a clear separation between the different zones, so the whole thing doesn't feel like random squiggles. And for things like the mustache, running the hair in a distinct direction helps build up even more separation. Now, of course, the hair closer to the head will have much smaller tufts since it's generally finer. Let's get his explorer hat on him with a nice rugged band and a little line for a lip around the rim. Now some hearty shoulders with a wrinkly shirt, and I actually think it'd be cool to give him a thick leather backpack to match his leather hat. And lastly, I'm going to fade his body into a solid dark shadow. That way I'll have a nice clean area to put the logo. Now we'll give him a warm, rich color for his skin, some calming blue eyes, and since Mountain Dew's main brand color is green, why not use that for his hair? I guess he's just spent so much time in nature that he's slowly turning into a plant.
You're the plant.
Of course, the hat and the backpack straps are going to be brown, and a darker green for his shirt. And now I can sneak right in here and add some hatch lines for shading, since I'm going for a decently stylized look for our mountain man. And that will continue up to the wrinkles and the darker areas on the face, as well as really dark areas like here under the hat. Now another quick layer of solid shading to help us break up the hair a bit more, and a secondary layer of soft shading just so those transitions feel a little smoother. But if you thought I was done, well, you're wrong. We have yet another layer of shading just around the big hair shapes I formed earlier, which should really help those areas stand out from each other. The whole face needs some shading as well, along with the hat, the straps, and the shirt. While I'm down here, I'm going to fade this black into a little more of a green, just so the area isn't so dark, and I'll add in some extra shadows on the shirt to help these wrinkles feel more natural. Well, he kind of looks like the toughest Oompa Loompa I've ever seen, but I like it. Now, I would still like to have some mountains in the background, just to really show that this is a mountain man. And I'll use these same shading techniques that I used on the character, making sure there's enough contrast between the rocks and the man. Let's go with a punchy green sky to stick to our color scheme, and some subtle clouds back in the distance. Maybe a little rim line around the character would be good, just to help him pop out that much more. Of course, we need a cool stylized font for the logo, which I will bend a bit, and I'm going to put original above that, since Mountain Dew has several different flavors. Then I'll make it red as an homage to the can's original color scheme. Maybe I'll stick a cool tagline up here for that outdoorsy, adventurous spirit, and let's finish up with a super soft layer of texture across the whole thing. Well, we've gone from Mountain Dew to Mountain Dude, and from an edgy teenage brand to a drink for the health-conscious trailblazer. Oh, and by the way, I actually made an entirely different design for Mountain Dew, and I'm going to post the process video over on my TikTok if you guys can help me get to 10,000 followers on there, which will allow me to monetize, so I can start posting regular short-form content in between longer YouTube videos. Watch out though, there are a few robot Brandon accounts over there that like to steal my content to make money from it, but I've linked my real account down below, so go follow me if you want to see this mystery design and help me defeat the Robo Brandon army. Moving on, we're going to tackle Doritos, a chip brand adored by goats around the world. Now, not only did these things make killer taco shells, but they really aren't even that bad for you. They just seem like they would be because they were molded in some manufacturing plant and deep fried in giant vats of oil. But if we make them look like they came from a small town family farm instead, well, that might just be enough to make them appear a little healthier. So let's start off by finding a font that feels kind of vintagey, because that alludes back to an era where things were made by hand. I think this little guy should work perfectly. Now, this is actually just a set of vectors rather than a typical font that you could type out. So I'll need to drag these together to spell out Doritos. And I think I'll actually use this fancy little R instead, just to give this some extra flair. We'll get rid of these decorative lines and pop that in here. I'll stretch it out so it takes up more space on the bag. And you know, I kind of like the idea of putting this on one of those old-timey ribbons, because those always had a very authentic feeling to me. Now I can warp that to fit in there. And maybe a little tail coming off the D would help give it more prominence, since it is the first letter in the word after all. And let's make the whole thing an earthy tan color. Now I think it still feels a tad too clean, so I can just take this cloud texture, save it as a Photoshop file, and then use that as a displacement map to give these edges some wobbles, almost like it was painted by hand. Now I'll give this a solid drop shadow to help it feel more 3D, then a subtle red outline just for a bit of separation between the letters and the shadow, which is a style I think looks pretty cool. Now I know I want this thing to have a lot of texture and grit, so I'll use this craft paper for the background, then these little dots to give it a nice vintage printed look, maybe some bigger red dots so it looks like the text has kind of been roughened up a bit, and finally a slight touch of grunge. Now we want these chips to feel like they came straight from a family farm, so I'm going to place this farm illustration right up here at the top, but I don't really want it to take up so much space, so what if we put it inside of a circle, kind of like we're peeking out a tiny window where we can see the farm from. Let's erase some of these lines though, just so the main objects in the illustration read more clearly. Oh, and now we can wrap our ribbon around that and pop it out the other side. Now technically Doritos are nacho cheese flavored, but apparently nacho cheese is often made with cheddar cheese, which just sounds much healthier for some reason. And that's cheddar cheese flavored, technically, which we'll put in a super tiny font and make it darker so people will pay less attention to it. And you might be surprised to know that these chips actually have no cholesterol in them, which is the perfect thing to say if you want to make these seem good for you. I'll make this text yellow to bring attention to it, and then maybe an extra line to help separate these text blocks. Why don't we go ahead and add a second ribbon down here that I can warp this text block to fit, give it a tiny shadow, and I'll even throw in a couple blocks of artisan cheese. Now maybe these ribbons could actually wrap around themselves, and those parts would be darker of course, because we're looking at the back of the ribbons. And now that I look at it, these kind of look like holes, which gives me an idea. What if we got a big old pile of chips and placed them right in between here, kind of like the chips are falling out one hole and into the other. Of course, a couple can peep over the ribbons for some extra depth. Now you might have noticed, but these aren't Doritos. But with a little lighting and a dash of orange, they become decently passable. Let's just get some nice yellow lighting on these, kind of like they're out in the fresh sunlight on our small family farm. Speaking of which, I'll stick old-fashioned up here to really hammer that vibe home. Let's get some shadows cast by these ribbons, of course the chips as well, and I actually think the top would look better darker, just so we can bring more attention to the actual farm scene. And lastly, a little rim light across the ribbons, and a subtle bottom shadow too. And even though these chips come straight off a factory line, you'd swear they're natural artisan-made snacks from the finest farm in town. Our next healthy battle will be with M&M's, which also happened to be the first candy that went to outer space. Now here's the thing, there's very little redeeming health qualities when it comes to chocolate, except for maybe dark chocolate, but these aren't dark chocolate. However, they are peanut M&M's, so my brain blast for the day is instead of branding these as chocolate candies that contain peanuts, I'm gonna brand them as peanuts with a thin chocolate coating. They're exactly the same thing, but one sounds way healthier. So let's start with two big M's for our logo, and whereas the original design had dark letters with a white outline, I'm gonna do the opposite by using light letters with a dark outline. Now I really like the idea of extending these out to make them super beefy. I'll have the S just kind of hang off the side here in a bit of a playful manner. Of course the and has to go somewhere in here, so what if I just put that on an actual... In a previous video, I redesigned junk food as healthy snacks, and you all seem to love it. So in this video, I'm turning that upside down by rebranding healthy foods as junk food to make scarfing down that pureed broccoli a little easier. First up, we have Green Giant's whole kernel corn. Now, threatening you with a 60-foot-tall, steroid-abusing Shrek is a heck of a way to get you to eat their canned corn, but I want to take a more fun approach to encourage you to buy this. So I'm going to grab another familiar green character from one of Jim Carrey's biggest hits, The Mask. Then start reshaping his face into a new Green Giant mascot, something that's a bit more quirky and fun than the original, to better match the over-the-top look of typical junk food mascots. I for sure want to keep his Chad-like jawline, but make it even more extreme. And I'll even shave down his skull to get those cartoony proportions I'm looking for. Now our new giant has to be happy, of course, because he gets to live off of nothing but pre-cooked yellow vegetables. We don't want to just show the corn pieces on here, because then people would realize they're just buying boring vegetables. So to make it seem fun and junky, I'm going to make his teeth out of corn. Now, you might think that's a stupid idea, but I'll remind you that many people with yellow teeth have accomplished great things. I figure a giant probably needs some pretty dang big ears if he's going to hear people from way up in the air. Just need to situate those on his head and make it a little fatter to match everything else. Now, I am kind of afraid if we leave him bald, his head will burn from being too close to the sun, so I'll throw some stylish, thick black hair around his noggin and 2 bushy eyebrows to boot. Now, as it is, this probably won't sell too well. So, as you might have guessed, I'm just going to use this monstrosity as a base for a more refined illustration. Get these eyes to resemble something a little more human, and get this hair to look less like a blob of jelly and more like hair. Put some gums between those teeth and add a tad more detail to the ears. Now, once we have a little green on the skin, we're ready to tackle the shadows. When it comes to something complex like this face, it can often be really helpful to draw contour lines over top of it to help you better visualize it as a 3D object. And once that wireframe is in, you just choose your lighting direction, like the upper top right, and it's a whole lot easier to tell where the shadows should go. And you might notice that I've made sure to choose a lighting direction that gives us a lot of contrast between the darker left side of the face and the much brighter right side. I'm actually launching a full course on lighting and shadows in the next couple of months. You can sign up on my website to get notified when it drops, and you'll even get a special bonus surprise when you purchase the course. Now I'll add a blurred version of that same shadow to give it a smoother look, and to tie in with the super black hair and mouth, I'll add some really dark shadow areas at key points around the face. And why stop at one layer of shading when we can have 2? Honestly, I really dig this kind of look, because it just seems to help give the entire character a lot of extra volume. For a touch of flair, I'll add in some bounce lighting across the edge of his face, as well as areas of the skin that are close together. And you can even further push out that form with some soft shadows in the dark areas and soft lighting in the bright ones. And just as a stylistic choice, I'm going to add some ridges to help him feel a bit more blocky. Lastly, I feel like no giant has perfect skin, so some blemishes and blotches are in order. Let's get the eyes in real quick, and I'll just give those a cartoony green iris to match his skin with some small shines for a bit of life. Now we can get to those corn teeth. So corn tends to have these little pits in them, which is great because your average person's tooth does as well. Now admittedly, these will probably look closer to gold teeth than corn, but my main goal really is to just make them look pretty. A touch of softer shading, just like the skin, some subtle bounce light between the teeth, and of course they won't look gold without some big sparkling shines all across the front. I'll take care of the gums real quick too, and finish off with some black shadow to help separate all the different mouth parts. Obviously this can't be a Green Giant product if the can isn't green, but now we do have green on green, so I think a blue accent will help our buddy stand out more. And maybe I'll even add in a yellow accent on this other side for even more contrast. I've actually recently seen several illustrations use tiny little highlights to help the skin not feel so matte, and I actually really like the extra shiny look that it gives certain characters like this. Now when it comes to the hair, we can leave the majority of it black, but because the giant is green, I'll paint a little sliver of green lighting in here. And that's a trick a lot of cartoons use to help a character's black hair better match the rest of their body. Just like Shigo has a green hair outline instead of a white one to match her green suit. Of course, it'll be blue over here though because of that accent light, and a little touch of reflective light will give it extra volume. Now my big idea here is to make it look like our jolly Green Giant has popped his head out through the wall of the can, similar to an old cartoon. I'll just make everything inside the can black, since the light can't get in anyways, which will also save me from having to paint him body. The metal in this image kind of feels too soft to me, so I'm thinking some sharper reflections will help it better match the character's cel-shaded style. Then the rim lighting will match the rest of the scene to help tie it all together. A little drop shadow will help those pieces feel 3D, just gotta warp them to make them look realistic. And that big old giant head is gonna have a shadow too. Let's get the Green Giant name up here. I'll leave a little of it covered by the hair, just to help make the head really feel like it's popping off the can. This is technically a can of whole kernel sweet corn, but I'm gonna call them Golden Bites instead, because that feels way more like a junk food snack. And our giant does have golden teeth after all. Well, we've gone from a corn product your mother wishes you would eat to something that looks like your next dentist bill will send you straight to the poorhouse. Next up, I'm going to try turning Sun-Maid raisins into junk food. And I'll be using the sponsor of today's video, Kittl. It's basically a one-stop shop design software. And for non-professional designers, they've got a huge library of templates to start you off on the right foot. You can change all the colors of the design super easily, choose different fonts to better match your brand, and even adjust all the warpings of the individual elements elements, which is super cool. Or if you're like me, you can just use the templates for inspiration, because I'm really digging this vintage style. So I'll just grab this little sun man here, adjust his colors slightly, and cover his current face up, because I want to find a new one. And out of all of these, I think I like this mouth and these eyes. Kittle even has masks that I can use to spread the eyes further apart. Now, instead of raisins, which sounds way too healthy, I'm gonna call them grape gems to make them seem like a grape flavored candy. Let's get some funky vintage fonts for these. I think the grape text should be purple, and I'll choose this 3D text style to pop it off the package. They've also got this really cool line effect that I can use to have like a blue light shining up in a retro style. I'll give gems a more subtle version of that and leave it white for a bit of contrast. Now, the original brand is Sun-Maid. As you can see by the maid on the package, I'm going to turn it into Sun-Maid. So it's like our happy little sun character is making these grape candies himself. I'm thinking a pink background to match the grape theme. Then I'll take a circle, stretch it out, and then make it purple so that text really pops. I was also able to find this sick swirl illustration, which I'll plop this little gradient on top of and adjust the colors so it looks like the sun is actually casting out that light. Maybe he'll even be making some shines on our grape text below. Now I want to put a big juicy grape right between these two text blocks. So I can either choose one from Kittle's massive library of illustrations, or I can use their AI tool to create one in several different styles, or I can even upload a custom one I made myself, which really is a great feature because sometimes you might want to put something in your design that isn't in their current collection, like a logo or a product shop. And with the layers panel, I can place that right between the two words. Then I can warp this text to make it look like it's hugging the grape, a little sparkle coming from our grape gem, and I'll even throw in a few drops of grape juice to make it feel super delicious. Now let's give all our text a shadow, a little halftone burst behind the sun, and then one of my favorite parts about Kittle is all the cool textures they have, like this noise texture that will give our design some grit, or this halftone pattern that will bring the style of all of our elements together perfectly. Now I used a custom box mockup for my junk food raisin brand, but Kittle also has a ton of pre-made mockups that you can use for any of your designs, and all the lighting and warping is done for you. Kittle really is an amazing tool for beginners, and even a great way for more seasoned designers to create designs quickly if they need to. You can try Kittle out today completely free with my link down below, and use the code Brandon to get 50% off your first month of Pro. So the shriveled fruits that used to ruin every cookie they were in are now a sweet grape treat that everyone is excited to try. Up next we have LaCroix, which is a popular brand of flavored sparkling waters. Basically, it's for those weak people who can't handle plain water, but they're health conscious enough to not drink 10 cans of Pepsi a day. Now I've chosen the lemon flavor here, and I'm going to turn it into a sugar-stuffed, epic-looking energy drink. We'll start off with a crisp modern font for the logo, and according to science, adding extra pointy bits will help it feel more energetic. I also think I'd prefer a curved X instead of a straight one, just for some personality. And of course, every cool energy drink obviously has to have a tilted logo. I do like the blue of the original text, but I'll go with more of a neon version of that color. And heck, maybe we can just make this thing a straight up neon sign. If I can just finagle a nice shiny metal frame for it. Now you can't just have a 2D sign, and it's honestly amazing how a few shadows in the crevices and a couple highlights along the middle surfaces gives us a pretty convincing 3D look. Then a little blue rim lighting on this bad boy to match the blue text, and you probably wouldn't even be able to see it on the can, but I can't not put a metallic texture on a metal sign. These types of signs are usually darker around the